Horror stories have always held a strange kind of power over us. No matter how many we hear or how many times we swear we're done with them, something keeps pulling us back. Maybe it's that uneasy feeling that, for just a moment, the impossible might actually exist. Or maybe it's the idea that the dark hides far more than we're willing to admit. Every tale serves a different purpose. Some make us hurry to our rooms after turning off the last light in the house, standing still for a second before stepping into the darkness. Others leave us wondering if we're truly alone in the room. And then there are those stories that don't just scare us. They linger, as if opening the door to something we were never meant to let in. This video brings all of those experiences together. Every one of those nights when I told you 4 horror stories before bed on that secondary channel I abandoned long ago. Leaving them there to fade away felt like a waste, so I've gathered them here so more people can enjoy them. This video is a little different from what you're used to on the channel. You don't need to watch the screen to enjoy it. You only need to listen. Let it play in the background while you work, draw, play, or simply close your eyes and relax. I know a lot of you do. And of course, don't forget to enable YouTube's stable volume feature in the video settings for the best listening experience. That said, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who responded to the pinned comment in the last video and for the incredible support you always give me. And of course, I want to give a special thank you to Letter and Miguel for the donations. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Remember, if you'd like to be featured in the next video, make sure to reply to the pinned comment where you'll find this question. What was your favorite horror story? Without further ado, don't forget to leave your precious like and subscribe to help the channel grow and reach more people. Every like is one more coin to escape poverty. If you're unsure what to comment, just type meow in the comments section and I'll give you a heart in return. Comments are incredibly important and help the video a lot, so don't forget to leave yours. Get comfortable and turn off the lights. Welcome to almost 2 hours telling you creepy horror stories. We had bought a bottle of whiskey, some Coca-Cola, ice, and a few glasses. Everything we needed to enjoy a few drinks on the beach. Just the 4 of us, my 3 friends and me. It was a beautiful night. The sky was stunning, filled with stars, and illuminated by a huge, gorgeous full moon. We talked about girls, football, motorcycles, and the big party we were planning to throw to end the summer. The conversation was lively, and one of my friends, probably already tipsy, started telling awful jokes. But since we were all a bit drunk, we laughed even harder. Then one of my friends suddenly got serious and told us a legend he had heard in a small village during his vacation. The way he told it, it was like he hadn't had a single drop to drink. Listen, I'm going to tell you a legend I heard recently in my dad's hometown. Apparently, when there's a full moon, if you step into the shower, close your eyes and say Sheila 3 times. Don't tell me Sheila appears, right? I interrupted mockingly. Ah, so you've heard it too, he said, surprised. I haven't, but come on, that's classic. Say Veronica 3 times while going upstairs, and her ghost shows up to push you down. We all burst out laughing, except Pedro, who wasn't amused at all. In fact, he looked angry. Go ahead and laugh, but that girl has killed people, he said. Okay, but who the hell was Sheila? One of my friends asked. She was a little girl who died bleeding out in the bathroom. Supposedly, she slipped and hit her head. She tried to call for help, but no one heard her. Her mom didn't because she was drunk, and now she's out for revenge, or something like that. I glanced at my friends, and we all burst out laughing again. Pedro, who had told the story, got even angrier and said he always showers with his eyes open and sings ever since he heard about Sheila. That only made us laugh harder. But to be fair, he kind of had a point, because whether it's true or not, the moment someone tells you not to think about something, you do. It's wild. So we went back to chatting and drinking. When the whiskey ran out, we hit a nightclub to dance and then headed home. On the way back, one of my friends blurted out the dumbest challenge you could imagine. I bet you don't have the guts to take a shower right now. Pedro looked up at the sky and saw the huge full moon. Say Sheila 3 times, and you might get a little surprise, he said. Fran looked at us and dared us to shower, either saying the name or not, so we could hop online afterward and share our Sheila experience. At first, I thought it was a fun and silly idea, but in the end, it really wasn't. Even though we were laughing when we said goodbye, I could see the unease on my friends' faces, and I felt it too. When I got home, I went to my room, undressed, and headed to the bathroom. I turned on the light, sighed, and closed the door behind me. I hesitated before stepping into the shower, but eventually I did. I turned on the water and started rinsing off. It actually felt nice. We had danced like crazy, and the heat was unbearable. I splashed water on my face and closed my eyes. And then a single thought popped into my head. Sheila, Sheila, shh. I snapped my eyes open in a panic. I'd almost said her name 3 times. But come on, what was I thinking? I had laughed at this whole thing, and now I was scared? What nonsense. So I took a breath, pointed the water at my face again, and closed my eyes once more. Sheila, Sheila, Sheila. My mind went blank. I opened my eyes. Damn, I had actually said it. I stood completely still. The room fell into dead silence. Then, click, the bathroom light went out. At the same time, I heard another sound, clack. The lock on the door had slid shut. Now I was standing there, in total darkness. Maybe the light going out was just a coincidence, but the lock? Maybe something fell in the kitchen, I told myself. I couldn't move. All I could hear was the water running. I didn't dare pull back the shower curtain. My breathing grew fast and loud, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. I have no idea how much time passed when suddenly, the shower curtain moved, as if someone had brushed past it quickly. The bathroom began to light up faintly from the glow of the moon outside. That's when I saw it. The silhouette of a girl behind the curtain. That's all I could make out, but I was frozen with fear. She started getting closer. My breathing grew louder. She stood right in front of the curtain. I was holding the shower head, and for a moment I thought about swinging it at whatever it was. But I couldn't move. Then she placed her hands against the curtain, palms open, moving them slowly up and down, over and over. I could feel her head pressing against the fabric, like she was about to come in. Her hands kept sliding up and down, faster and faster each time. I couldn't make out any features, just long hair. I didn't know what she was wearing or what her face looked like. The fear was overwhelming. She didn't move away from the curtain, and I couldn't stop shaking. My heart was pounding like crazy. I thought I'd have a heart attack or just pass out. I stood there frozen in the shower. She didn't come in, and I didn't move, so I shut my eyes and thought, go away. Go away, please go away. When I opened them, the silhouette was gone, and the lights were back on. I pulled the curtain aside, and in the mirror, I saw a pale, ghostly face, white skin, lips that matched the complexion, eyes a light, icy blue, long, wet hair. She gave me a brief smile, eyes wide open, and vanished. I noticed the lock was still bolted. I threw it open and ran to my parents' room. Dad, Mom, there was a girl in the bathroom, a dead girl. They were half asleep and startled. They thought I had a nightmare. But hell, I was still naked and shaking like a leaf. I was so terrified that I had to sleep with my mom that night, and my dad had to take the couch. The next morning, my mom woke me up with a grim look. I have some terrible news. I still felt that lingering fear in my body. Fran and Carlos, they died last night, cause unknown. I broke down. It was the girl, it was her. I couldn't stop repeating it. What girl, sweetheart? My mom asked. Sheila. If you say her name while you shower under a full moon, her spirit comes to kill you. My mom looked at me with pity. Sweetheart, I know you're in shock. It's normal to imagine things after such a tragedy. No, I swear. I saw her last night. I don't know why she didn't kill me. She didn't believe me, and I felt so helpless. I stayed home all day, didn't go out, didn't call anyone. Then it hit me, Pedro was fine. Nothing had happened to him. I got up to call him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. At the funeral, all our friends were there. After the service, Pedro came up to me. "I'm not trying to kick a man when he's down," he said, "but I told you so." "Wait, nothing happened to you?" I asked him. He smiled sadly. "That's because I didn't take a shower." "Then why didn't she kill me?" I asked. Pedro looked serious. "I don't know. Maybe you got lucky. Maybe it was the shower curtain." He gave a small chuckle. I gave a faint smile and nodded. When I got home, I didn't want to go near the bathroom. But I had to. Nature called. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. A chill down my spine. A presence. Something. Someone. After I was done, I ran straight into my mom's arms. That became a routine. For almost a month, I couldn't pee without feeling watched. Eventually, I got used to the chill and the ghostly presence that seemed to haunt every trip to the bathroom. 3 years have passed since then. Even now, I still feel it. That cold, that presence. Maybe it's Sheila, maybe not. But once, while I was showering using Pedro's method, singing loudly and keeping my eyes wide open, I swear I felt someone there with me. I heard something being written on the fogged up mirror. When I got out, I wasn't surprised by what I saw. "I'm waiting, Sheila." Have you ever thought you saw something out of the corner of your eye? A figure, something black, something dark. And when you turn your head quickly, it's gone. This story I'm about to tell you actually happened. Whether you find comfort in thinking the person who experienced it was just insane is up to you. But they say it was this very story that drove him insane. He was a teenager at the time, and it happened to him constantly. Seeing things just barely, always in the periphery. You know, the way it happens to all of us. Except for him, it started happening more often. Twice as much. Then 3 times, then 4, then 5. He said he didn't tell his parents because it didn't seem important. Not really. He didn't get along with them anyway. It was just a weird little thing, nothing more. He mentioned it to his friends, but none of them had experienced it as often as he did. And instead of getting better, it got worse. Until one day, the inevitable happened. He turned his head to catch a glimpse of the thing at the edge of his vision. And this time, it hadn't disappeared. It stayed there, tall, unnaturally tall, emaciated with ribs that jutted out in impossible ways. Its skin was oily, sickening to look at. Completely naked, but with no genitals. Its legs were like sticks, if you could even call them legs. The shoulders protruded grotesquely. A long, thin neck held up an enormous head. Too large, so large it looked like it shouldn't be physically possible to support it. The face was smooth, no wrinkles, no features, no mouth. Just 2 huge, hollow sockets for eyes. And it was staring directly at him. He says that moment would have been the most horrifying of his life, if not for what came after. But in that instant, he remembers flipping the chair he was sitting in and bolting down the hall, crying, screaming, shouting, and crashing into his parents' room. His father opened the door, and he threw himself onto the bed, his dad closing the door behind him, cutting off the sight of the horrible thing that had followed him into the hallway. He remembers watching the door close, remembers thinking, "It's gone." His father opened the door again. The figure was still there, but neither of his parents saw anything. Not his dad, not his mom. That night was terrible, but it passed. The creature didn't return during the day, and for a fleeting moment, the boy allowed himself to believe it might have been his imagination. But then the next night came. This time, the thing was in his room, standing right in front of the door. It didn't move, it didn't speak. It just stared at him with those empty, hollow eyes. Again, he screamed. Again, he cried. Again, his parents came running, confused, alarmed. But they saw nothing. And although the thing sometimes disappeared for a while, it always came back. And each time, it stayed longer. In the records documenting his case, he referred to it as Paleface. His friends slowly distanced themselves. The ones he thought would stand by him didn't. And the terrifying part wasn't that he never had real friends. It was how easily they left. As easily as anyone would leave someone who claims to see things no one else can. His girlfriend left him. His mind began to fracture. Eventually, he saw Paleface even during the day. It no longer needed the darkness, and it still never did anything, just stood there watching him. Always watching. He stopped going to school, quit his hobbies, clung to his parents, begged not to be left alone, desperate to have someone near him at all times, just to avoid being alone with Paleface. But just like his friends, his parents gave up too. They committed him to a mental institution. Months passed. His hatred grew. He tried everything, threw things at Paleface, objects that passed right through him like he wasn't even real. He screamed at him, cursed at him, tried to attack him, cried, begged, pleaded. Nothing worked. Then one night, when his tears had dried and he could cry no more, with Paleface standing inches away and staring straight at him, he saw something else, a vision, a gift, maybe. He saw thousands of people, real people, not imaginary, and each one of them had their own Paleface, not identical, each monster slightly different, just like people are different from one another. Each person had one, their own personal specter, their own shadow. That's when he understood. Everyone has a Paleface. The only difference is most people just can't see theirs. Just as we all might have a guardian angel, Palefaces are something else entirely. They are the escorts of the damned, those who are lost, those without angels, those already condemned. Some people say they've never seen anything in their peripheral vision. Maybe those are the ones who are still safe. And you? Have you ever seen something strange out of the corner of your eye? Do you want to play a dangerous game? I'll tell you about one, but let me be clear. I don't want any trouble. I won't be held responsible for anyone who decides to try this. Let these words serve as my statement. I am not responsible for anyone. You're doing this at your own risk. They say there are many forbidden games. The Ouija board is one, but the Ouija is garbage. It's rare for anything truly strange to happen while using it. There's also the glass game, but that's just the bastard child of the Ouija board. However, if you're feeling brave, and you think you have the guts to mess with things you really shouldn't, then I can recommend something much better. It's called Don't Look Back. The items you'll need are very simple, but the rules are strict. First, a box of matches. From this box, take out exactly 3. No more. These are all you'll be allowed to use. You'll need the box itself to strike the matches. You'll also need a sheet of paper and a pen. And most importantly, you must be completely alone in your house. No friends, no family, no one can help you. It has to be just you. You need access to the entire house, not just your room. You'll understand why later. Choose one room, preferably one without any windows. If your house doesn't have a windowless room, make sure to shut and cover every window tightly. The goal is absolute darkness, the kind where you can't even see your own nose. Once that's done, there's one last requirement. You must do this after midnight, not because the time itself matters, but because everything must be completely still. Turn on the light in the room you've chosen for this experiment. The rest of the house must remain in total darkness. Turn off your phone, unplug any radios, computers, or anything that might make a sound. Silence is crucial. Now, once you're in the lit room, stand there in silence for about 10 minutes. This is just to prepare your mind, to help you focus, to let your thoughts settle and your body relax. Although, I should warn you, your mind won't stay relaxed for long considering what's about to happen. For now, just breathe deeply and remain still for 10 minutes. When that's done, take the pen and paper and write out a few invitations, one for each room in your house, excluding the one you're standing in. Tear the sheet into pieces, one per room. On each piece, write something like this: I, your name, invite you to a party. I would be honored if you attended. The event will take place from start time to end time. Be careful with the time limit. If you foolishly say the party lasts until 6 in the morning, you're going to regret it. Keep it short. 5 minutes is good, but no more than 20. That's already pushing it. Once your invitations are written, leave the lit room without turning on any other lights, and slide one invitation under each room's door. These are no longer scraps of paper. They are formal invitations. Wait in silence for a few minutes. Then say aloud, "You're all invited to the party," and then turn off the light. Now that the room is in complete darkness, take the matchbox, your 3 matches, and walk to a corner of the room. Face the wall. It'll be pitch black, so move carefully. Wait there in silence for about 5 minutes, then strike a match. If it doesn't light on the first try, let it fall and move on to the next. If none of the 3 matches light, no one came to your party, feel free to turn on the lights and call it a night. Bad luck. But if any one of the 3 matches lights, you have guests. Hold the match carefully, and whatever you do, do not look behind you. Even if you think you can handle it, if you feel something behind you, you'll regret turning around. One more thing. It's extremely rude to try to end the party early. You're the host. You set the time, and now you must honor it. So hold that match for as long as you can. When it starts to burn your fingers, let it fall. When the flame goes out and darkness returns, I don't know what kind of person you are, but you're going to feel something horrible. Because in that moment, you'll know you're not alone in the room. You'll feel it in your muscles, you'll feel it under your skin, and it will be very, very close. Even in total darkness, do not turn around. You might see something, even just a glimpse, and that would be enough. Keep facing the wall for as long as you can, at least until you're absolutely certain the time you set has passed. If you did everything right, if you followed the instructions, your guests shouldn't be hostile. In fact, the very few people who've ever played this game and survived to talk about it, they say they heard a soft, quiet voice behind them whisper, "Thank you." And at that moment, they felt the presence leave the room. When you're sure it's over, when you know the party has ended, you may turn around and turn the lights back on. See? It was a terrifying experience. But here's the thing. All those people who couldn't last, who turned around or turned the lights on too early, they never spoke about what they saw. Not because they didn't want to, but because what they saw was so horrifying, so deeply scarring, that it marked them for life. Have you ever heard people say that the most horrifying things tend to happen in big countries? Many sociologists theorize that it's because of the higher population density. It has nothing to do with a nation's geographical size, just the sheer number of people. The more people there are, the higher the odds that something unspeakable will occur. Something so disturbing that it eventually becomes legend. What I'm about to tell you is one of those legends, and it happened in the United States. It was sometime in the 1980s. The person who later became a psychiatric patient, who spent years trying to recover from what happened that night, says it all started when he simply woke up because he heard noises. He was around 8 years old, an only child. Naturally, his fear escalated the moment he realized the sounds were coming from his parents' bedroom. But there's something particularly strange about this story, something that at first might seem bizarre. But when you think about it more deeply, it feels unsettlingly familiar. When your mom or dad comes home, you recognize it without them even saying your name. You don't need to hear their voice. You can tell by the sound of their car pulling in. You know the sound, don't you? You remember it. You recognize the jingling of their keys, the weight and rhythm of their footsteps, the way they close the door. But that night, this boy didn't recognize anything. And even though he was just a kid, he wasn't stupid. So, eventually, a thought began to take root in his mind. There's someone in the house. Someone who shouldn't be. And there's something else you don't need explained. When you're that young, you can't fend for yourself. Your entire world depends on mom or dad. So, this poor child, lying in bed, blanket pulled up to his chin, wide awake, assumed one of them would take care of it. There's a stranger in the house, so he stayed completely silent, clinging to the safety of his bed. But putting together the pieces, like the fact that the noises were coming from the master bedroom, where his parents should have been sleeping, and yet neither of them had said a word despite the loud thuds, that didn't point to anything good. The boy started to tremble, and years later he'd confess, through tears and guilt, that he did nothing. Because he was scared, because he was terrified, because his mind simply couldn't face what it already knew. Deep down, he knew, but he couldn't even allow the thought to take shape. He heard the bedroom door creak open, and then the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the hallway carpet. Once, then again. The person went back into the room and came out dragging something else. Each second stretched into an eternity. The boy just lay there, frozen, listening as something heavy scraped along the carpet, inching closer with each step. Until finally, it stopped. Right outside his door. The boy knew he knew that whatever it was had been dropped just outside his room. He says he realized it not just because of the sound, but because of how the intruder did it. He didn't just leave those heavy things there. He slammed them down, one by one, against his bedroom door. Trembling, holding back sobs, barely breathing, not even whimpering, he stayed as still as he could. Because he knew deep inside that something awful had happened to his parents. And he didn't want the stranger to know he was awake. He didn't want to be next. The plan made sense after all. He hadn't made a sound, so he just kept his eyes shut and tried to match the slow rhythm of sleep breathing, using every bit of cleverness a child can summon in a moment of horror. Then the door creaked. The stranger was opening it. The boy didn't move, not even a peek. He didn't want to see. He just shut his eyes tighter. The moonlight spilled faintly into the room, but it didn't matter. He wanted out. He wanted to wake up from this nightmare. Except it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. His hands trembled. His feet trembled. He wanted to cry, but he didn't. He kept pretending. And then, that sick bastard dragged his parents' bodies, first his father's, then his mother's, into the room. The boy suspected the truth. He didn't want to believe it, but he knew. Then the man left the room for 5 or 6 minutes, and came back. To the boy's horror, he returned with 2 chairs. He placed one directly in front of the bed, right in front of the boy's face, and the other just beside it. If the stranger realized he was awake, he might kill him. The boy didn't know why he felt that so strongly, but He knew it. And in that moment, every instinct told him, don't let him see your eyes. So he kept pretending to sleep as that monster sat his parents' bodies in the chairs, staring directly at him. Then the man picked up a knife, or at least what the boy believes years later must have been a knife. He cut a deep, terrible wound into his father's torso, and with 2 gloved fingers, he started painting something on the wall directly across from the bed. And then the stranger left. The boy didn't cry. Not at first. It took him half an hour before the sobs broke through. Only when he was sure, absolutely sure, that the man was gone, did he let himself fall apart. Eventually, the police arrived. The house became a crime scene. But that's not where the story ends. It ends the next morning, when the sun finally began to rise, and the boy mustered the strength to sit up in bed. He didn't look at his parents' bodies. He couldn't. But he did look at the wall. It wasn't a drawing. It wasn't some psychedelic pattern like he'd imagined. It was a message, and it said, I know you're awake. A young man was on a school trip. He was having fun, enjoying himself with friends. The bus had taken them to a small town. Now, when I say small town, you might imagine some underdeveloped, empty place. But it wasn't like that. It was actually a tourist spot. So, it wasn't exactly cheap or ugly. The locals were quite polite, people who made their living off tourism. As soon as they checked into the hotel, they went to the reception area to enjoy a big dinner. That's when the boy, chatting in the lobby with his friends, overheard something curious during a conversation with the receptionist. Apparently, there was a room on the top floor that was completely sealed off. No one was allowed in. What he heard next was a horrifying tale disguised as a simple anecdote. Every hotel has its own story, and something truly dark had happened in that room. That's why they'd locked it up. The incident had caused such a stir that even the 2 neighboring rooms, one on the left and one on the right, had been evacuated just to keep people away from that area. The hotel owner clearly didn't want anyone going near it. The receptionist, being young and kind-hearted, had warmed up to the boys and shared the story with them, though she begged them not to go anywhere near the place. But what happened in there? They asked. I'd rather not talk about it, she replied. Nowadays, the young man explains that, at the time, he dismissed the girl's superstitions as typical of small towns. Just another ghost story for those who are sensitive to such things. He was from a big city, after all, and probably a bit more skeptical by nature. Still, the idea had taken root in his mind. He asked his friends to come with him to the top floor, but they were older and not interested. They told him to stop being childish, to grow up, and to join them in something more age-appropriate. But maybe due to his own immaturity, or simply because he was the kind of person who preferred a good story over a good party, he gathered his courage, took the elevator, and went up alone. As the elevator doors slid open in front of him, he instantly felt a wave of regret. The hallway was pitch dark, as if it were still under construction. The only sources of light were the elevator itself and a small window at the far end of the corridor through which the streetlights could be seen. He mustered up the courage, maybe because he had no girlfriend, didn't enjoy parties, and just didn't feel like he fit in. Many of you will know that feeling. So he thought, what else am I going to do? He wasn't about to go back down looking like a coward. So he walked down the hallway, searching for the room they'd mentioned, and he found it. He took out his phone and smartly used the flashlight to confirm the number. That was it. The room that was supposedly cursed, according to the receptionist's story. Convinced it was all just nonsense, he placed his hand on the door. It was cold, but nothing happened. So he knelt down, leaned his head toward the keyhole, and looked through it. The hotel had big windows, and the same streetlights that helped him see in the hallway dimly illuminated the inside of the room. He looked to the left. The place was filthy, not because it had been trashed, but because clearly no one had set foot in there for years. It was obvious, even in the dim light and heavy shadows. But then he looked to the right and saw a naked woman, sitting with her back against the wall, curled up in a ball. He could see her hair moving slowly, and she was gently rocking. He was terrified. He shot to his feet, accidentally made a noise, and ran down the hallway toward the elevator. When it finally arrived, after what felt like the longest 30 seconds of his life, he turned back. Though his panic had driven him to flee, he calmed slightly when he saw the woman hadn't followed him. In fact, the door hadn't even opened. To this day, he says he doesn't know how he did it. But he went back down the hall, praying no one would call the elevator from below so it would still be waiting for him with its helpful light. He got on his knees again and peeked through the keyhole once more. But this time, all he saw was red. A solid, overwhelming red. He could no longer see the bed, the bathroom door, the windows. Everything was engulfed in that color. Even the keyhole itself seemed stained with it. He can't describe much more because he only looked for about 3 seconds. He stood up again, afraid, not quite panicked, but seriously frightened, and began to move quickly down the hall. That fast-paced walk that isn't quite running, but faster than normal, when fear is creeping up behind you. He stepped into the elevator and went back down. Then he waited over 40 minutes for the receptionist who had told him the story to come back and relieve the other staff member. When she finally returned, he approached her and said, "I need to talk to you." "What happened?" she asked. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I went up there alone and did exactly what you told us not to do. And now I'm really scared." She looked at him with a mix of disappointment and understanding. The kind of look only a woman can give a man who's messed up and is genuinely afraid. "Why would you do that, you idiot? But please tell me what happened in that room." Without going into too much detail, she explained. A woman had been brutally murdered in that room. She'd been beaten with such cruelty, such hatred, that what had once been a human face was reduced to a mangled mess of flesh. It didn't even look like a woman anymore. And yet, what people remember most from the story was one final, chilling detail about her body. Her eyes were completely red. A very young boy was in math class. He was bright, sharp, a good student. A bit shy, perhaps, but naturally kind and light-hearted. Someone who, despite his early maturity and brilliant mind, often went unnoticed. There were only 6 minutes left before class ended. He was bored, doodling in his notebook. The teacher wasn't saying anything he didn't already know. In that moment of distraction, he looked out the window. His desk was near the large classroom windows, and something caught his eye. On the grass, near a tree, there was a fold, a piece of paper. As soon as class was over, the boy grabbed his backpack and rushed outside, hoping no one else had spotted the mysterious object. He was lucky. He got to it first. He picked it up and saw that it was a folded photo. When he opened it, he found himself staring into the eyes of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. About his age, long hair, stunning eyes, and holding up a peace sign with her left hand. The boy began to wonder. Reasonable questions filled his mind. Suddenly, he wasn't thinking about Pokemon, or Xbox, or PlayStation anymore. Not even the internet. The girl in the photo had taken over his every thought. The next day, with the photo still in hand, and clinging to the hope that he'd found it for a reason, especially since it was on school grounds, he started asking his classmates if they had seen her. Everyone said no. Driven by desperation, he even approached teachers he'd never spoken to outside of class. "Sir, do you know this girl? Ma'am, have you seen this girl before?" Each time, the answer was the same: no. The boy felt crushed. Maybe finding that picture had just been a meaningless coincidence after all. But that night, after spending most of the day thinking about the girl, he woke up in the middle of the night. Something had stirred him, giggling. The giggle of a little girl. Naturally, he was terrified. He stayed under the covers up to his mouth and didn't move. The next morning, he had a lot on his mind. It was impossible not to connect the dots, right? What had happened the night before, the girl in the photo, could it all be a coincidence? He didn't think so. The laughter was clearly that of a girl. His obsession outweighed everything else. Still holding the photo, he went and asked his sister. Just a wild guess. Have you seen this girl before? No. Then he went and knocked on neighbors' doors. Have you seen this girl? No. The search grew more and more hopeless, but he couldn't stop. He was obsessed. He was in love with the girl in the photo. It was a very sad day for him. So, he went to bed, and once again, in the middle of the night, the giggling woke him. The same girlish laughter. He thought again, could it be her? He was still terrified, but maybe a little less than the night before. And this is the moment, the human crossroads, where fear and obsession clash, and obsession wins. The boy got out of bed and looked out the window. He didn't know exactly where the laughter was coming from, but one thing was clear. It was coming from outside. He peered out and heard it again. Louder this time. He decided to take a chance and face the unknown. He tiptoed downstairs so he wouldn't wake his parents. He unlocked the front door and stepped outside. The night air was cold. He heard the giggles again, now even louder, pulling him further away from the house, as if beckoning him. He followed the sound to the street, and in the street, headlights lit up his face. A car struck him. He died instantly. His body hit the windshield, then slammed to the ground, landing in a growing pool of blood. The driver, drunk, slammed the brakes. Heart pounding, he stumbled out of the car, dropped to his knees beside the boy, and took his hand to pull the photograph from his fingers. In his panic, he looked at the picture, and in that photo, the man saw a beautiful little girl holding up 3 fingers. This story begins and ends on a farm far from the big city. One of those places where life is quiet, but only because there are barely any people. So when you picture what I'm about to tell you, clear your mind of shops, shopping malls, stores, maybe even paved roads. This happened to a farmer. When people finally went to his house, years after he was presumed dead, because no body was ever found, it was nothing more than a filthy, crumbling wreck of a farmhouse. Broken windows, no doors, moldy wood, and black where there should have been white. Amid the dust and decay, they found a letter. To this day, no one knows whether this horrifying tale is true or just an urban legend. But those who tell it claim the myth began with the letter itself. So calling it fiction doesn't quite feel right. Because the paper was there. A cruel joke, perhaps, if you're willing to believe that a scrap of paper as old as the house itself, buried in dust, was left by some kid passing through, some prankster pulling a sick joke, inside the home of a man who vanished. The farmer's supposed letter read like this. Every afternoon, he stacked his hay bales near the horse stable. He harvested, bundled, and neatly arranged them, just as life in the open fields should be, stacked by the animals who fed on them. Until one day, he saw that someone had moved all the hay bales he had worked so hard to pile. Not stolen. No, that would have been better. More comforting even. They hadn't been taken. They had been moved, about 20 meters away from his house, laid out on the ground, one by one, each separated by 10 or 15 meters. No longer stacked, just there, arranged. The man was deeply disturbed. Confusion gave way to anger. Of course, he thought it had to be some kids playing a cruel prank. Furious, he slammed the door open, stormed down the stairs, and began dragging the bales back, one by one. They were large, not heavy, but big enough to make the task exhausting. He returned them exactly as they were before, right by the stable. He swore to himself that if he ever caught those kids, he'd drag them by the ears and make them confess, and maybe even march them back to their parents' house at gunpoint. But he didn't know then that he'd made a false promise to himself, because the next day, despite checking the windows multiple times before bed, the hay bales had moved again. This time, they were even farther, spread out across his land, each about 30 meters apart, trailing across his property in a loose line. Naturally, he assumed the same culprits were responsible, only now he was angrier than ever. Teenagers, idiots, little punks out to mess with him. Or so he thought. He spent the entire day dragging the hay back again. This time, he put the bales inside the horse stable and locked the doors with a padlock. Surely the brats wouldn't go as far as breaking a lock. That night, he tried to calm his nerves with a warm glass of milk. In the letter, he says he managed to relax a bit, took a bath, even fell asleep. But for some strange reason, he woke up before the sun rose. Farmers rise early, but this was even earlier than usual. And because his internal clock worked like a charm, again, he was a farmer, he knew something was off the moment his eyes opened. A heavy feeling crept over him. He was afraid of his own house in the dark. He grabbed his lamp, his shotgun, headed downstairs, walked to the hallway, eyes locked on the front door. He opened it, expecting to catch those pranksters red-handed, but there was nothing. What he did feel was the weight of the air, thick and strange. Holding the lamp, he stepped down onto the porch and noticed something. The stable door was wide open. The padlock was snapped. The chains lay in a heap on the ground. His heart pounded, rage flared in his chest. But that anger vanished instantly when he realized the horses were in a frenzy, screeching, reeling. One of them was dead. Beheaded. He didn't realize it at first, not when he saw the body, but when the blood-soaked hay touched his ankles. Thick, sticky, cold. One of his animals had been slaughtered brutally. And do you remember those hay bales? They were back, placed exactly where they had been before, lined up, forming a wide arc, a semicircle that wrapped around nearly the entire edge of his land. As the sun rose, he could see them stretching out like dark bricks in the distance, one here, one there, one farther out. The man nearly broke down in fear, and he didn't mind admitting it. He understood the message loud and clear. Whoever or whatever had been doing this didn't like its work being undone. So the poor man, terrified and too afraid to leave his land, for fear that the rest of his horses would be killed, and in those days, a farmer without animals was as good as dead, decided to stay. Shotgun in hand. The police were far away and he had no phone. You've surely gathered by now this happened a long time ago. That night he steeled himself, determined to stay awake. With a big jar of coffee by his side and his shotgun across his lap, he sat in his rocking chair, right outside his front door, watching the darkness. No streetlights, just the moon, his only friend. Midnight came. He wrote that it had been years since he'd stayed up so late. I remind you again, he was a farmer. Then, at 3 a.m., he saw it. He heard the rustle of bushes far, far off in the fields. Something moved. Something tall. He described it as a kind of giant mantis, slim, impossibly tall, maybe 4 meters high. It peered toward the house. He saw its eyes glinting like those of an animal. Terror bubbled inside him, boiling. He couldn't take it. He ran back inside, slammed the door, and broke down crying. Because he had shut it so hard, and now, whatever that thing was, it was probably already sprinting toward him. But thankfully, he was wrong. He peeked out the windows, but if the creature was still outside, he couldn't see it clearly. He said it looked hairless, skinless even, as if it had exposed muscle, like some raw, sinewy beast. Even so, he could never quite make out what it was. But that night, it had moved the hay again, to the edges of his property, walked to the stable, terrified the animals, removed even more bales, and, by morning, he realized it had circled his entire house, a hay bale at every point of the perimeter. It was only then, as daylight returned, that he found the courage to step outside, perhaps encouraged by the animals still in the stable, and that's when he saw it, hiding in the bushes, watching him. That's when he understood. He had become the pet of something monstrous. He tried the experiments. He let all his animals go, horses, pigs, chickens. They ran. Nothing stopped them. But when he tried to leave, he felt it, the thing drawing near, watching, ready. It wasn't after the animals. It wanted him, just as he feared. He was the pet of something unspeakable, and he wasn't sure his shotgun could stop something that had easily dragged and decapitated a horse. He ended the letter saying he was running out of supplies, that he didn't know what cruel god could curse someone with such a fate, but in his desperation, he had to try something. The final words of the letter were these: "I'm going to try to escape." He was never seen again. The man walked through the fog. He could hear his own footsteps, yet nothing appeared ahead of him. Still, he kept walking step after step, without thinking, without reflecting. He was simply waiting, expectant. And he walked, until at last, emerging from the mist, stood a vast cavern, its entrance dark and cold. An entrance made just for him. And in that moment, he knew. He knew it with both reason and instinct. The time had come. Yes. This was it. This was what all the religions had spoken of. He had arrived at the gates of hell. He, a lonely, lost soul, understood that he had no choice. He had to go in. There was no alternative. He stepped inside the cavern. The darkness was suffocating. Something vile and pulsing awaited him deep within. He could feel it. The stench of rotting flesh was overwhelming. And then, a voice. It echoed from every pore of his being. A voice so immense, so terribly powerful, it said, "Welcome." The poor soul, the poor man, trembled. He was falling apart, barely holding himself together. His voice cracked, soaked in tears, as he whimpered, "Who are you?" The voice, piercing yet patient, replied, "You know who I am." And the man began to cry. "I don't understand. I don't understand why I'm here. Why? I lived a good life. I never harmed anyone. Why?" Then, after a long silence, the voice, calm and deep, asked him, "What did you expect?" He wiped away his tears, still sobbing, and pondered. "On Earth, they say your greatest trick, the cruelest lie you ever told humanity, was convincing them you didn't exist." But the voice corrected him. "No. The greatest trick I ever played on humanity was making them believe they had a choice." The man sobbed even harder. "You're the devil, right?" The voice corrected him one last time. "No. I am God." I'm going to tell you how to perform an experiment that could change your life forever. But first, a warning. I don't want any trouble for sharing this. If anyone asks, I'll deny everything. You're on your own now. First, find a mirror in a high traffic location. It must be a mirror that many people pass by every single day. That detail is non-negotiable. If the mirror hasn't absorbed enough energy, none of this will work. Trust me, a hotel room bathroom is ideal. It's worth the trouble to get access to one. Bring 2 cigarettes with you. If possible, choose a strong brand. From what I've seen, the figure you're about to meet seems to prefer them that way. Once inside the room, turn off all the lights and lock yourself in the bathroom. Stay in complete darkness. Light one of the cigarettes and, using only the dim glow of the burning tobacco, stare into the mirror. Start smoking, but never look away from your reflection. Not for a second. No matter what happens, do not break eye contact. If you do, everything you've done will have been for nothing. Around halfway through the cigarette, the room will begin to fill with smoke. Your eyes will burn. You'll probably start to tear up. Still, and I can't stress this enough, keep staring at yourself in the mirror. If you've done everything correctly, your reflection will begin to darken. It'll become blurry, shadowy, until it turns pitch black. The smoke will grow thicker, and before you even realize it, you'll sense a presence, a figure sitting in the bathtub just a few feet away from you. Don't panic, and whatever you do, don't run. The figure will ask you for a cigarette. That's why you brought 2. Hand it over. You don't need to light it. That's not your problem. In fact, by the time you even think about it, they'll already be smoking. At that moment, you can ask anything. Anything at all. And not only will they answer, they'll tell you the truth. Always. This is your chance to get the answers you've always wanted. Just don't take too long. Have your questions ready in advance. Why? Because you need to keep track of how much of the cigarette the figure has smoked. If they finish it, they'll attack you. And it won't matter who you are, how strong you are, or what you try to do. You will not survive. As the cigarette nears its end, you'll notice the figure becoming more solid, more real, less like smoke and more like flesh. That's your cue. Reach forward and take its eyes. Don't hesitate. It won't be fully corporeal yet. So yes, you can do it, and you must. You absolutely cannot let them finish that cigarette. That would be a fatal, stupid mistake. Don't be that idiot. You have to be fully committed. Rip out the eyes. The moment you do, the figure will start to scream and curse you, in a language that is your own, but twisted in ways you've never imagined. And the worst part? Your hands will start to burn. The pain will be unbearable. But whatever happens, do not open your fists, because if you do, even after taking the eyes, they'll still be able to see through them, and they'll find you. With your fists clenched tight and their eyes inside them, leave the bathroom. Turn on every light in the hotel room. Make sure there are no mirrors anywhere. If you open your hands too early, the lights will burst, and the figure will come for you. You must keep your hands closed until 3 a.m., or preferably a little later. I suggest waiting a bit longer just to be safe. Only then, you can open your hands. You'll find 4 seared marks burned into your palms. Don't worry, they'll heal. But from that moment on, you can never again be in the dark in a place with a mirror, because if you are, the figure will find you, watching you through your palms. From that day forward, you'll have nightmares every time you sleep, for the rest of your life. And your hands will always be cold. It won't matter if it's summer or if you're in the warmest place on earth. They'll always feel like ice. In exchange, you'll be able to make a few of your wishes come true, so long as they're not too grand. Don't get greedy, but there's a good chance that the things you truly desire will, in fact, become real. You'll also be able to see, and therefore anticipate, disasters, catastrophes, genocides, assassinations, only terrible things, never anything good. Despite everything, I'd say that's a small price to pay for absolute knowledge. You can find all kinds of strange things on the internet, disturbing things, and even illegal ones. Dark corners where the worst of humanity hides. And if you let your imagination run a little wild, you'll know exactly what I mean. Sick people, twisted minds. But what I'm going to tell you today is something different. It's about a very peculiar website. One that, according to urban legend, can only be accessed at midnight. To most, that might just sound like a creepy little gimmick. But people who are into this sort of thing know those systems are real. There are horror games out there that only let you in at night. They use a small program that checks your computer's system clock and blocks access if it's daytime. But this website, called Blind Maiden, supposedly hosted somewhere in the Netherlands, with a strange, almost untraceable URL, had one detail that made it especially disturbing. You couldn't trick it. Changing your computer's clock didn't work. It had to be nighttime. Real nighttime. Somehow, the site could tell. There was no way to fake it. From this point on, things get blurry. Nothing is truly confirmed. But the legend says that once you got in, the first thing you'd see was a black screen with white text that read, "Make sure you're home alone." It may sound trivial, but the experience wouldn't begin unless that condition was met. They say that if someone else was in the house, nothing would happen. It was like the link kept looping back on itself, over and over. The second requirement was that you had to turn on your webcam. It had to be pointed at your face. If you didn't, the page wouldn't respond. It just sat there, still and silent, until it detected your face. Once both conditions were met, you were taken to a second screen. Even simpler. A new message appeared. Are you sure you want to continue? This is your final warning. There was something about that message, something off. It made even the bravest users uneasy, especially when they noticed a tiny window appear in the upper left corner of the screen, showing their own face. The website was using their webcam, broadcasting their image in real time. But to who? Some people quit then and there. Others, call them reckless, decided to keep going. They accepted the terms. And what happened next was truly terrifying. It's hard to even talk about. Your face would remain on screen, tucked away in a small corner. But now, something else appeared in the center. The most grotesque, repulsive face imaginable. A dead woman. Her eyes were sewn shut. Her lips, too. Her nose looked like it had been sliced off and sealed with a scar. Her hair was black and oily. Her skin had the pallor of a rotting corpse. People say that just looking at her made them gag. Some threw up. But the most disturbing part? It wasn't a photo. You knew it wasn't, because you could see her walk. It wasn't an animation. It looked like a live broadcast, a real moving figure. And just when you hoped it was all part of some twisted interactive site with a hired actress, you noticed where she was. The walls, the hallway, the furniture. It was your home. She was inside your house, and she was walking slowly, deliberately toward your room. According to the legend, no one knows what happened to those who went through with it. There are no records, no eyewitnesses, only rumors, and they all say the same thing. The blind maiden tore their eyes out and left them to die. They say teamwork can take you further, whether it's school projects, college assignments, or even just having fun. Two heads are better than one. That was the case with two brothers. One was 15, the other just 12. They were close, really close, the kind of bond you only see in movies. Unfortunately, they shared the wrong hobby. They were obsessed with games no child should ever touch. The glass game, Ouija boards, Bloody Mary. They even tried the cigarette game once, just to see what would happen. But no matter what they did, whether summoning a spirit or even a demon, nothing ever worked. And that lack of results, it frustrated them to no end. The younger one, as you might expect, was more immature and much more curious. While his older brother was starting to take an interest in girls and other typical teenage stuff, slowly drifting away from their little rituals, the younger one refused to let go. He didn't need his brother to join in anymore, just to be there. He wasn't ready to give up. He was a smart kid. knew his way around a computer better than most adults. He loved horror stories and would spend hours online searching for new rituals and games to try, always with his brother by his side, until the day he decided to do it alone, the day he made the mistake of typing into Google, how to make a spirit angry. He wrote it just like that, word for word, until he stumbled upon a site. Dark, obscure, with an outdated, cryptic layout, something that looked like it belonged to the early 2000s. But the content? Unsettlingly compelling. It described an experiment. No author, no disclaimer, no warning. Place a large mirror in front of your bed. Lie down and pretend to be asleep. Convince your reflection that you're truly asleep. Fake it so well that you fool it. And the moment you feel like you've succeeded, when your reflection has taken the bait, raise your right hand and form the number 4 with your fingers. If you've done it correctly, your reflection will have been tricked. It won't show a 4, it'll show something else. A 1, a 2, a 3. But beware, the ritual warned. From that moment on, never ever turn your back to your reflection again. When the older brother came home, he found his parents in a panic. With good reason, his little brother had vanished. According to them, he hadn't asked to go out. No plans with friends, no movies, nothing on his schedule. He had simply disappeared. By 3 in the morning, they were still wide awake, sleepless, terrified. They felt it in their bones. Something terrible had happened. They thought maybe it was a kidnapping. But the older brother, he knew better. He felt it, deep in his chest. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was something else. Something darker, and deep down, he already knew what it was. He didn't know exactly what ritual his brother had tried, but he was certain that was the reason he was gone. With a sick feeling in his stomach, he rushed to the computer, opened the browser history. Terror exploded. He tore through the room, checked under the bed, inside the closet, and that's when he noticed it. The mirror was missing. Have you ever heard of the strange case of the black-eyed children? I invite you to look it up online. There are countless accounts about them, and even though they're often dismissed as just an urban legend, the truth is there have been several real reports made to the police. But if the black-eyed children are so well known today, it's largely because in the mid-1990s, they supposedly picked the wrong person to mess with. That man was brave enough to come forward and share his story. He's now an old man, and even back then, he wasn't exactly young. He's a journalist, and that's why the story I'm about to tell you comes with a remarkable level of detail. United States, Gainesville, Florida. It was 11 at night, cold. The man was leaving a mall after meeting his editor at a coffee shop. Now, Gainesville isn't exactly a bustling city. At that hour, especially on a weekday, the streets are completely empty, just like the giant mall with its massive parking lot, where his old car sat parked all alone in the distance. He walks, his breath turning into little clouds of mist in the cold air. Reaching into his pocket, he pulls out his keys, unlocks the door, gets in, and settles into the driver's seat. He reaches up, turns on the dome light, and starts going through his notes. He didn't hear whispers. He didn't hear footsteps. He didn't notice anything at all. That's why it startled him so much when he heard a soft tap on the window. The man turned his head, looked outside, and saw 2 children. They couldn't have been older than 12 or 13. Both wore coats and had their hoods pulled up. "Sorry to bother you, sir. Good evening. My friend and I just got out of the movies. We're a bit worried because no buses have come by and we have no way of getting home. We'd be very grateful if you could open the door and give us a ride." The man frowned, and maybe you noticed what immediately caught his attention. The boy's vocabulary. It was strange. Too strange for a child. Almost unnatural. Sure, there are polite kids out there, but this boy spoke with a remarkable command of the language. His words were overly formal, even majestic. Meanwhile, the other boy, who had a pale, freckled face, didn't say a single word. In fact, he kept glancing around nervously, eyes scanning the empty parking lot again and again, as if he didn't want anyone else to show up, as if he was making sure no one was watching. as if the two of them were about to do something they weren't supposed to. That first impression was enough to make the man hesitate. He couldn't bring himself to reach for the door lock. He just sat there, frozen. The boy spoke again, a small smile on his lips, almost as if he knew it was only a matter of time before the man gave in, as if he were trying to impress his friend with how easily he could convince someone. "Sir, please, I don't want Mom and Dad to punish me. It's late. We were just at the movies. I beg you, please let us into the car." The journalist's thoughts began racing. What can I say to get out of this? Something didn't sit right. So he said, cautiously, not wanting to sound too harsh, "You can wait outside for the bus. I know it hasn't come yet, but it will. And besides, I'm in a bit of a hurry." The boy's expression shifted, just for a moment, into something almost annoyed. But then he slipped right back into his sweet tone. "Sir, please. I don't want to get home at midnight. It's so late. We're scared to be out here. Please, open the door for us." It wasn't just, "Give us a ride home" anymore. He repeated it. "Open the door." Twice now. That's when the journalist really started to panic. He wasn't sure if he was about to make a complete fool of himself, but he wasn't willing to take the risk. He felt silly for wanting to say he didn't talk to strangers. After all, he was a grown man, and they were just two kids. But still, he said, "I'm really sorry. I can't help you. Forgive me." And that's when his hands began to tremble. He says they trembled because he'd almost given in, because he realized the boy had some kind of power. He was that persuasive. He was still hesitating. The more he refused, the more anxious he became. And outside, the boy grew more and more visibly frustrated. But the worst part was that the other kid kept scanning the area, like he was on lookout duty, making sure no one else came. "Sir, please," the boy said once more, still overly polite. "Don't refuse to help children. I'm begging you. Let us into the car." Maybe it was the fact that the boy kept speaking so kindly, even though he was clearly suppressing anger. Then he noticed not just the irritation in the boy's voice, but surprise, as if he couldn't believe his trick wasn't working, as if he genuinely thought no one could resist him, and the journalist saw that. And the more details he noticed, the more it felt like the kid's plan was falling apart. The man started shaking even harder, and the boy must have noticed how scared he was. That's when the old man leaned forward toward the window, squinting, and saw something that the darkness had kept hidden until then. Something now visible thanks to the overhead parking lot light. He pressed his face close to the glass and saw it clearly. The boy speaking to him and the one standing silently beside him had completely black eyes. Not just black irises, their entire eyeballs were pitch black. The pale-faced kid immediately looked terrified because he realized that the man had seen it, that he'd noticed. His face said it all. I can't believe he saw. He looked at his taller friend, as if accusing him, angry. The taller boy's face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. And so the man, with all the strength he could muster, gritting his teeth, turned the key in the ignition, started the engine, and, thankfully with no one behind his car, threw it into reverse. The tires screeched against the pavement, and without caring if the police saw, he floored it, sped away. But his heart nearly stopped when he looked up at the rearview mirror. The children were gone. Like I said at the beginning, this man was courageous to share his story, and he swears, on his honor and his reputation, that it's true, that it really happened. And what was his surprise? In the months that followed, people from all over the United States, and later from Canada and even Europe, began to report sightings of children with those same black eyes, always late at night. The most disturbing part? Their stories matched his, down to the smallest detail. Almost all reports involve kids trying to get into strangers' homes. So now the question remains. These people noticed something was wrong, but what about the ones who didn't? They're not here to tell their story. A hunter found himself deep within a vast, dense forest. Even if someone had climbed to the top of the tallest pine tree, they wouldn't have seen the end of that green, thick, and damp expanse stretching endlessly beneath a dark gray sky. The man, perhaps not the brightest, got lost. Plain and simple, his sense of direction failed him. Before he even realized it, he was too far in, surrounded by identical trees, unable to recognize a single landmark. His only companion was his massive shotgun. At first, he wasn't worried, but the landscape, which gradually became more suffocating, began to unsettle him. Visibility was poor. Beyond 30 meters, everything blurred into a haze. Just trees, just undergrowth, just green. He was confident at first, but once he understood he was truly lost, fear began to rise in his chest. The hours dragged on, and the fear grew stronger, until it nearly turned into panic. And the worst part was that since this happened many, many years ago, being caught in the dark in a forest like this was truly dangerous. The cold was biting. Every breath he exhaled turned into a puff of white vapor. His hands trembled, and even though he wore a coat, he knew it wouldn't keep him alive for long. He decided to walk in a straight line, choosing a single direction, but it made no difference. He was still lost, maybe even more than before. He knew fear wasn't helping, but it was impossible to shake off. He tried to look for signs, for patterns, for any kind of mark, but there was nothing, just trees, all the same. Finally, as night began to fall, he saw something between two tree trunks. Pushing through the dense foliage, he spotted it, a clearing, and at the center of it, resting among dead leaves and damp ground, stood a small cabin. He approached, circled the structure, and knocked on the door. No one answered. Then he made a desperate choice, one of survival. He would go in. He would invite himself to stay the night. And if the owner showed up, he'd explain, apologize, and maybe, if he was lucky, get some help in the morning. He pushed the door. It creaked open. He had expected to break a window, but that wasn't necessary. He took off his coat, then his boots. Left in his socks and hunting clothes, he stepped inside. There was no electricity, no lights, just the faint silver glow of the moon slipping through the windows. He climbed into the bed and curled up beneath the sheets, ready to rest. But then, thanks to that pale moonlight filtering in, he noticed something unsettling. Portraits. Dozens of them. Too many. At first, he didn't think much of it, but little by little, they began to seem strange. In each one, the faces were pressed together, clustered unnaturally close, twisted expressions, some hateful, others simply wicked. They were portraits of people staring at him in grotesque ways, with an eerie, almost threatening intensity. The hunter did his best to stay calm. He turned his back to them, pulled the blanket over himself, tried to stop thinking about it, hugged the pillow, and drifted off to sleep. What happened to him, we do not know. We don't know if he ever made it out of the forest. But what we do know is this. The next morning, when the light of dawn filled the room, he realized something. There were no portraits on the walls. What there had been were windows. World War II had come to an end. Europe was in ruins, and the world had changed forever. Two superpowers had emerged, one in the East, one in the West. The United States and the Soviet Union were now poised to shape the future of humanity, the future we live in, the future we know today. They were turbulent years, yet one must say, cynically but truthfully, that they were also years of great scientific and medical breakthroughs. The darkest depths of human cruelty bore fruit. From Joseph Mengele's laboratories to Japan's infamous Unit 731, disturbing experiments led to the development of medicines that, while useful, were tested on living human beings. There was no ethical watchdog, no one of goodwill to say, "Stop, that's enough." It was a field unburdened by morality. Scientists did whatever they pleased, even if it meant experimenting on people. And that's exactly what happened in the Soviet Union. where one day a group of researchers asked a chilling question: what happens to a human being when they are completely deprived of sleep? Today, a quick Google search will tell you what sleep deprivation does to the body, but back then, no one knew. Everything you find online today stems from that experiment, from the answers uncovered in that Soviet trial. They gathered 5 prisoners of war and whispered promises into their ears. If you agree to participate, if you're obedient, cooperative, and answer all of our questions, you'll be set free. You'll no longer be prisoners. You'll be allowed to go home. Of course, these 5 poor souls agreed. It was the late 1940s. There were no closed circuit cameras at the time, so they constructed a large, airtight room with thick concrete walls and reinforced windows more than 6 inches thick. Oxygen was pumped in through a wide metal pipe embedded in the wall. This was how the prisoners were able to breathe. But oxygen wasn't the only thing in that room. A second pipe released a gas, one that kept the mind alert and chemically blocked the body's ability to rest. It triggered the same response as an energy drink, but far more intense and relentless. To make things worse, every drink given to the prisoners was laced with stimulants in heavy doses, deliberately designed to keep them awake. There was also an inhumanly loud sound system in place, ready to blast unbearable noise or blaring music anytime someone began to drift towards sleep. The entire setup had been designed with clinical precision. Cold, calculated, there was no way to rest. They were left alone in that chamber. Food was scarce. Know why? Because hunger keeps people awake. It fuels anxiety. They were allowed to drink, but had to relieve themselves in a toilet placed in the corner of the same room. There were no beds, just a pile of books for them to read, to pass the time, hour after hour, day after day. By the end of the 3rd day, the prisoners, these test subjects, began to experience hallucinations. 74 hours without sleep, eyes wide open, no rest. They started seeing things, visions, strange phenomena, or so they claimed, whenever the scientists picked up the microphone and asked for updates. The doctors listened intently, scribbling everything down with a horrible, grotesque sense of curiosity. They had long since abandoned any trace of human ethics. By the 6th day, the experiment approached its 1st week, and the hallucinations had grown much worse. Now the subjects were acting erratically, pacing like caged animals, spinning in place. One of them spent over 8 hours sitting in a corner, staring at the wall and rocking back and forth. Others curled up on the floor, hugging their knees, also rocking. Another just kept walking until he spent an entire night frozen, staring into the camera, into the void, into nothingness, up at the ceiling with a gaze utterly lost in madness. Then came the strange sounds, whispers, scraping, unnatural silence. By day 8, things had turned grim. The prisoners were deteriorating fast. They no longer cooperated. They no longer cared. It became obvious they had been lied to. No one was going to let them go. The experiment would continue to the bitter end. Then, on the morning of the 10th day, something unexpected happened. They rebelled, in a disturbingly clever way. Despite their madness, they still had the ability to think clearly. They tore pages from the books they'd been given and used their own feces as adhesive, plastering the paper against the glass to block the scientists' view of the chamber. The scientists, desperate to keep watching, were forced to listen instead, and what they heard was chilling. That paradoxical silence, the kind of silence you hear at night lying in bed, the hum of nothingness, the murmur of the abyss. Hours passed in that silence. Occasionally, they heard movement, someone shifting on the floor. Then, one of the scientists spoke into the intercom. "We're going to open the door. Please cooperate. If you do, one of you will be released." Flanked by 2 soldiers, he stepped toward the chamber and opened it. That's when things turned truly horrific. This is where logic breaks down, where everything that followed defies reason. The prisoners heard them. One of them bolted upright, first crawling like an animal, on hands and knees, bones clicking against the floor. Then, like a spider, He lunged at one of the soldiers. The soldier was well protected, but no one expected that. Even through the armor, the prisoner's protruding, malnourished teeth would sink into his neck, ripping into his jugular and tearing off a bloody strip of flesh like it was skin from a fruit. How could he still have that much energy after going so many days without sleep? It was impossible. But that soldier became the victim of something primal, uncontrolled, pure, absolute, blind rage, a fury beyond reason. Because after biting into his jugular, the patient bit him again, shoving half his face into the bloody flesh, into an improvised cavity carved with hollow teeth. He widened the hole, ripping off strips of skin, chunks of jugular, and pieces of vocal cord. The doctor, splattered with blood, screamed in panic as the other soldiers opened fire. First, they tried to pull the attacker off their comrade, but they couldn't. He was latched on, too close. There was no choice. They had to shoot. They had to fire even knowing the bullets would also hit their fellow soldier. The man was already being torn apart so horribly that it was more merciful to put him down. They removed both bodies. The 4 remaining patients stood quietly, pressed against the wall, staring. Cold. Unblinking. And do you want to know the most disturbing part? The man who attacked the soldier wasn't the only one who was angry. The others were too, but they hadn't gone that far yet. They weren't angry about being lied to, promised freedom, only to be condemned to die in that chamber. The real reason? They were angry because someone had opened the door and let the gas out. They wanted to be left alone. They didn't want the experiment to end. They were afraid to fall asleep for some unknown reason. The door was closed again. Then came a conversation. One of the patients was chosen by the others to speak on their behalf. A scientist asked, "What happened? Why did you do that?" And the patient, with a broken, weak but steady voice, simply said, "Don't turn off the gas. We want to stay awake." 20 days passed. 20 days in which, of course, the soldiers who had entered with the scientist that day never cleaned the room. The pages were still stuck to the glass. The doctors couldn't see what was happening inside. They hadn't had visual contact in days. Water was still being supplied, but not food. And yet, they knew the patients were still alive. "Are you asleep? Are you asleep? Answer us!" No response. Eventually, they mustered the courage to open the chamber again, to see what had become of the patients. This time, there were more soldiers. They were tense, terrified, and they would live to regret opening that door a second time. Because this time, it was worse. Not because anyone attacked them, but because of what they saw. The patients were lying side by side on the floor quietly, and they had begun tearing into their own flesh with their teeth in neat strips. Feeding. You could see their tendons, wrist tendons, exposed like red cords, raw, bloody, glistening strings. They had been ripping themselves open. One had gnawed through his index finger down to the knuckle. He had devoured all the flesh. Only the bone remained, twitching absently against the floor. One had managed to tear off his own eyelids, not only to feed on the soft tissue, but to prevent himself from ever sleeping. Others had peeled skin from their buttocks, from their armpits. Some had chewed their knees, exposing the bone beneath. Blood pooled around them. Pus, too. Some wounds had become infected. They had eaten their fingernails, down to the raw flesh. One of them had eaten his own lips. And the worst part? They were awake. They saw the soldiers standing there. They didn't have the energy to attack, but their eyes followed every movement. One soldier vomited, another broke down crying and left the room. The scientist stood frozen, shaken to his core, and then he made a terrible mistake. "We're removing them," he said. He thought they were harmless now. He couldn't have been more wrong. As they tried to drag one of the patients by the ankles, the man sat up, abruptly, and lunged at the soldier. He gouged out the man's eyes, driving his thumbs in deep, all the way to the knuckles. The other soldiers rushed in, barely managed to subdue him, shot him dead on the spot. The remaining 3 patients stayed on the ground, watching, The experiment was officially over. Reinforcements were called. Then, like rotting slabs of meat, the remaining patients began to rise, prepared to attack. The soldiers opened fire, unleashing a storm of bullets in sheer panic. One of the patients lay on the ground, bleeding out, coughing up blood, mucus, phlegm, licking his cracked lips with a long red tongue, his eyes bloodshot, his breath deep, not to survive but to inhale the gas that kept them awake. And with the last strength left in his bones, he began to drag himself on his back, muscles twitching, inching his way across the bloody floor, leaving a trail from the center of the room to the gas valve in the corner. He had been shot in the gut, but it didn't matter. All he wanted was to breathe it in. That gas. That terrible, precious gas. The scientist, stunned, horrified beyond words, whispered, What are you?" And the patient turned his head, smiled, amused even as death crept over him, and he said, "I am madness. I am what you fear. I am what horrifies you. I am what lives inside your mind, in the most ordinary of mental states. I am what's printed in your brain. That human shape that never left. That still lingers in the deepest layers of the psyche. I am madness. I am madness." The deep web is, without a doubt, one of the darkest corners of the entire internet. I think many would agree with that statement, and probably just as many would agree on something else. Some things aren't meant to be found. Lost media that maybe, just maybe, someone once stumbled upon, but that perhaps should remain just that, lost. The story you're about to hear begins like this. It all started on a 4chan thread where a user posted a simple question. What's the most disturbing thing you've ever found on the deep web? It was a straightforward question, but it quickly gave way to hundreds of replies, each more grotesque, unsettling, and revolting than the last. But there was one reply that stood out from the rest. Not because it was the most gruesome, but because it was different, stranger. It told the story of a lost piece of media, something no one had ever heard of before. A lost anime hidden deep within the deep web, or rather, a short animated film. The person who shared the story claimed to have watched it many years ago. But what was truly remarkable, what made it feel real, was the level of detail in their description, as if they'd been carrying the memory with them for years and had finally found a place to let it out. Their post read as follows. It was a strange anime. The footage looked like it was from the 1980s. It had Japanese audio with English subtitles and lasted about 30 minutes. There were no credits. It felt like it had been ripped straight from an old VHS tape. As for the title, I honestly don't remember much. I think it was something like Go for a Punch. It started with a screen full of static. No logos, no music, no opening credits. Then suddenly, the image stabilized, revealing a sterile, white-tiled room. A Japanese public restroom. At first, everything seemed normal, until I noticed something strange. There were no windows, no exit door, just a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The stalls were broken. The sinks looked like they hadn't worked in years, and there was a huge cracked mirror along one wall. Then the scene shifted. 7 teenage girls were shown waking up in that place, some were in their underwear, others completely naked. There was no music, just ambient sound, and no explanation for how they got there. For the first few minutes, they spoke with an eerily calm tone, discussing whether there was any way out, until one girl sitting on the floor curled up against a wall whispered that there was no exit, that they would starve to death. Her words shattered everything. Most of them broke down in tears. Others panicked, screaming for help. Only one remained silent, a girl with long white hair. She didn't cry, didn't scream. Her expression was empty, as if none of it mattered to her. From that point on, the animation used slow fade-outs to black, with white text marking the passage of days. The girls grew weaker. One developed a fever. Another tried to drink from the sink, but the faucet only spat out a thick, filthy black liquid. Starvation was no longer the greatest threat. Dehydration would kill them first. Everything played out in total silence. Until one day, though I can't remember which, one of the girls suddenly began screaming uncontrollably, and that's when everything fell apart. What followed was a series of brutal, haunting scenes that I'll try my best to recount, even though they still haunt me. While the others slept, one girl tore open her own neck with her fingernails. The pool of blood beneath her was enormous. The girl who had screamed earlier, she saw it happen, then bolted to the wall and started slamming her head into it, again and again. You could hear her skull fracturing, until finally her body dropped, limp, motionless. From then on, each fade to black showed another day, and another girl gone. One slit her abdomen open with a shard of broken tile. Another shattered the mirror and used a piece of glass to cut her wrists. Another hung herself with her underwear. In the end, only 2 remained. The floor, once white, was now stained a deep red. The lifeless bodies of 5 girls lay scattered across it. The white-haired girl woke up to see the other trying to drown herself in the sink. But she couldn't. She didn't have the strength. She trembled, unable to go through with it. She needed someone to help her die. So the white-haired girl approached, took her by the neck, and forced her underwater. The other girl struggled, twitched, convulsed, until, finally, her body went still. And that's when something changed in the white-haired girl. For the first time, her expression shifted. Now she looked devastated. She knelt down and stared straight at the camera, breaking the 4th wall. Her face soaked in tears. And finally, I heard her speak. She opened her mouth and said a single word. Why? The screen went black. I cried that night. I fell asleep in tears. I couldn't understand how anyone could draw something like that, with such haunting detail. It was horrifying. To this day, no one has ever recovered the original file. No one has been able to confirm whether Go for a Punch ever truly existed. Who knows? Maybe this lost piece of media, one of countless others buried in the internet's darkest corners, is still out there, just waiting to be found. Honestly, you might have been better off not knowing. But hey, you're here now, so you kind of asked for it, didn't you? You've probably felt it before. That sudden creeping discomfort when someone's staring at you. Doesn't matter if it's from the front, the side, or even from behind. You feel it. It's sharp, almost acidic, sometimes even unsettling. And it's real. That invisible energy radiating from a fixed stare isn't unique to humans. Animals do it too. A cat that locks eyes with you for minutes without blinking. A dog that follows your every move while everyone else pretends it's not even there. Or a caged animal at the zoo surrounded by a crowd, yet it chooses you. Only you. And it won't stop watching. Now here's the disturbing part. It's been observed that some of the times you wake up in the middle of the night for no clear reason, it's not a coincidence. It's because someone or something was watching you. Size doesn't matter, and neither does what it actually is. If you didn't wake up because you were thirsty, too hot, had to pee, or heard a sound, but your eyes just opened for a few seconds in the dead of night, and then you went right back to sleep like nothing happened, it's because you felt it. Maybe not the most comforting thought to go to bed with tonight, but next time you wake up for no reason, in the middle of the night, well, now you know. So, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love reading them. If you want more videos like this, don't forget to support this one as much as possible and share it with as many people as you can. Also, make sure to follow me on my other social media platforms where I post exclusive content you won't find here on YouTube. And most importantly, a massive shout out to the channel members. Seriously, thank you all so much. If you'd like to become a member, just click the join button next to the subscribe button to unlock tons of perks and exclusive emojis while supporting me. If you're interested, join in. I'll be forever grateful. And remember, this video was made by a cat and cats can't talk. Thanks for watching. Take care and see you soon.